for this lovely virtual classroom. For starters, I will be recording the session, and this information will be great for sharing. So just wanted to let you know that. And give me a green check, because the green check is in the underneath on the right-hand side. You're going to see a hand and a green check. Give me a green check if you've ever been in a virtual classroom before. A red X if you have not. There we go. So everybody's been here. That's fantastic. Okay. Wonderful. So I'll just run over the tools quite quickly. You'll know that on the right-hand side, you'll see the participant panel with everybody's names of who's participating today. Feel free to raise your hand or give us a green check or red X for yes and no questions that come up, and the hands work as a toggle. So you click on the hands once, they'll go up. If you click on them again, they go down. So try raising your hand just for fun. I know, I need to get a live. This is fun, right? This is great. Fantastic. And Heidi, can you raise your hand? By clicking on the little hand, there you go. Fantastic. I've been told I use the word fantastic a fair bit. It's almost like when you go to Toastmasters and you say, ah. So I'm trying to find another word. Perhaps marvelous will be my new word. We're going to ask you as well, the virtual classroom is really interactive, and it's all about being able to connect. So if you have to leave for any reason, if your dog is barking, if someone's at the door telling you you've won the million, we ask you just to put your coffee cup up, and you'll find the coffee cup to the right of the check, the green check and the red X, and it's a little happy face. If you click on that drop-down menu, you'll find your coffee cup. So just put your coffee cup up so I know you found it. And what that does is that tells me that you've stepped away, it's not a problem, that you're not having IT issues, and all is good. Heidi, did you have a question? And you're muted, Heidi. So the other part that I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of before we started was the mute button. And it seems like you all are, but just remember it's a toggle. So if you want to speak, please click it again so that you'll unmute. And the mute is the microphone to the right of your name. So let's try unmuting and muting. There we go. And then muting again. If there's background noise, we ask that you mute your microphone. When I'm teaching smaller classes, I kind of ask people not to mute because I love to hear the breathing and the laughter. So it's all good, but in this set scenario, we'll keep the microphones muted so there's not too much background noise. And I'd like to draw your attention as well to the top left-hand side of the screen. So there's a big, thick blue arrow. So if you want to click on the arrow and click somewhere on this slide to claim a spot for just a moment. There's Sue's got one, Rose has hers, Dee, Russ. It's on the top. There we go, Heidi. Fantastic. And maybe make a little bit of space and use the text tool to write your name, your location, and one thing that you hope to learn from today's session. Linda, are you able to find the arrow? It's the top left-hand side of your screen. It's a big, thick blue arrow. So I'm asking you for your name, your location, and one thing that you hope to learn from this session. You might want to spread out a little bit. There's not a lot of room. You're going to end up writing on each other. So find a place that's quite light without. There you go, Heidi. Great. And Rose, you may want to move as well. There we go. So, and we'll just do a quick round table to see what everybody is. Okay. So Diane and Dave, you're from PEI, and you hope to get some tips on transitioning. Is that correct? Okay. Don't forget you're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Anything in particular that you'd like to know?
No, we're just looking for tips. That's all, so we know we're going in the right direction.
Okay, fantastic. And Rose, you're from Yellowknife. Is there anything in particular that you're of interest to you tonight?
No, just basically, you know, real life experience from Russ and his wife, and see how that might apply to other people and how I can possibly help others transitioning.
Okay, thank you very much. And Christian, you're in Kingston. You're muted. Did you want to let me know what you're hoping to gain from tonight? If you want to unmute your microphone.
be able to find my arrow. Yeah, I guess I'm hoping to learn more about the transition process. I am a nurse, and so just looking to learn more about what the experience is and what the supports and resources that are out there.
Wonderful. Well, you've come to the right place, that is for sure. Linda, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat your name, your location, and what you hope to learn today. And Sue, don't forget you're muted.
So I just want to learn how I can do some programming at the MFRC for those members and family members who are going through the transition.
Wonderful. So you want to know what would be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. And Heidi?
So mine is more the researcher perspective on the transition and the impact on the family.
Okay. And did you write that down, Heidi?
I did, but it kept going off screen. I think it's going too low. I did try.
Okay, then I'll be able to see it. And where are you located? I see it right there, Canadian Institute, and you're in Kingston. Okay, wonderful. Well,
thanks.
We are having Sarahina Flanagan just joining in, and we're just really, really thankful that that you are here tonight, and we hope that we can answer some of your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Diane and David Ling. They're a military couple who are extremely active community members at the Military Family Resource Center, Prince Edward Island. And this session tonight is sponsored by MFRC PEI. Diane was on the initial board for the MFRC PEI, and now Dave's on the board, and they're just great community folks. So I've called on Diane and Dave to introduce Russ and Lucie Morel Mann. Over to you.
Thank you, Margaret. Welcome, everybody, and I'll start off with Colonel Mann's bio. Colonel R.B. Mann, OMM, MSM, MBA, CD. Colonel Russ Mann has 35 years of service to his country with the Canadian Armed Forces. A graduate of the Royal Military College and Dalhousie University, Russ has served at most levels as a manager and a leader at home and around the world. He has served with the United States, with the multinational forces, with the United Nations, and with NATO. As division head in Morale and Welfare Organization to the Canadian Forces, Colonel Mann stewarded both the military family services and the children's education programs to meet the needs of the Canadian military families. His team was a major investor in and set standards, developed policies and programming for 32 nonprofit centers. He and his team facilitated development of boards of directors and executive directors of this unique partner network. In his career, Russ has learned about hard work, sacrifice, grief, joy, friendship, collaboration, listening, reflecting, and taking decisive action when it is needed. He has had a loving wife who has helped him comfort and adapt to post-traumatic stress, and who continues to put up with him in spite of his passion to serve. Colonel Mann enjoys walking their dog Jackson, gardening, and traveling with his wife and soulmate Lucie. David, over to you.
Thank you, Diane. Ms. Lucie Morel Mann has been married to Russ for 26 years, a former graduate of the Canadian Securities Institute and a stockbroker who specialized in options and tax shelters. Lucille had to reinvent herself as a translator when she married Russ to accommodate the various postings D&D had in store for them. She's also a certified goldsmith, the author of 2 fiction books, the former owner of a home renovation company, and an executive assistant to the chairman of a board of a major portfolio management firm. In 2012, she was awarded the Canadian Forces Medallion for Distinguished Service for her efforts in helping military families cope with numerous challenges associated with postings, for attracting much-needed physicians to serve families in CFB Bagotville, and for convincing the Canadian banking industry to limit the interest rate differential penalty for members hosted outside of Canada. She has since authored a few articles about mortgages and other financial issues for the Canadian Military Magazine, and helped some members recuperate thousands of dollars in their mortgage penalties. Being married to Russ has taught Lucie how to deal with PTSD and a move on an average of one move every 2 years. Lucie is also a 11-year cancer survivor, and she enjoys finally having her husband at home, taking long walks with their dog Jackson, reading, creating one-of-a-kind gold and silver jewelry, gardening, and traveling. Welcome.
Thank you.
My goodness, thank you so much. I had no idea of all the talents that you have, Lucie.
I still don't know why she married me.
Oh my goodness. So without further ado, we're going to begin the marvelous journey from Depart with Dignity to Veterans. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to you both, and thank you again for being here.
Okay, thank you, Diane and David, for that very lovely introduction. And thank you, Margaret, for inviting us to speak tonight. I'm going to start out, but there's certainly no shortage of what Lucie will be offering tonight. But since we're starting with Depart with Dignity, I thought I'd offer the military perspective of transitioning to civilian life. And really, there's no recipe that I could say is, you know, here's a cookie cutter cut and paste. To me, it really is a personal journey, but you can never prepare too soon. I just read an article today that Canada Company had shared that said a recruit on his first day of basic training was told by his sergeant major that today is the day you start planning your second career. And there's a little bit of truth to that. We all join, but we will all also get out. And so, like anything, we're taught to plan and be prepared. And I put up there the SCAN Second Career Assistance Network. For those who haven't been to one of those, really it's Defense putting together a number of lectures and a number of resources that then you and your family can choose to help guide you in your transition journey. There's some parts that are better than others, and I would probably have to say I don't think I've met anyone who said SCAN had everything they were looking for or that it was all great, but they certainly get something from it. Advice I had been given was to go to a SCAN about 3 years before I think I'm getting out, and then go again about a year before I get out. That was tremendous advice, because at least the first time I was exposed to some things and had a couple of moments where my eyes popped and I went, I guess I better start dusting some things off and getting ready. And in the year before I got out, I was really trying to pay attention to understand some of the details. The really big fear for me was finance. And I'll come back to that maybe a little bit later. It's important to set goals. Do you want to retire fully? Do you want to retire and go back to work part-time? Do you want to volunteer? Are you going to just take off the uniform and put on some other clothes to pursue your job passion, whatever that may be? If you know what your goal is, put your feet up and get on the rocking chair, go fishing, or volunteer, or maybe do some work. Set the goal and start to prepare and plan for how you're going to pursue that when you're no longer under that big paternalistic organization, the Canadian Armed Forces. Resources are important as well. And I know, as I said, finances were big for me, but there's so many other resources you need to have in hand. If you're going to volunteer or go to work, you probably want to have an up-to-date resume. You probably want to have a biography. And not all of us are sitting there day in, day out with a current biography or one that's geared to the civilian community. So really important to learn how to speak Civi. the civilian world doesn't necessarily understand acronyms. They might not even understand things like VAC and D&D. Many military spouses might not understand VAC. So trying to learn how to speak plain language and when you talk about your skills and experience as an ex-military, try and talk about it in terms civilians will understand. It's great to go and say, you know, I was a door kicker and I did a really great job for my platoon commander. Well, maybe what you want to say is I was able to plan and organize section level activities. I was able to work very well in small groups, and I was able to achieve the goals that were set on or before schedule. And that would be a lot better than saying I was a door kicker who was going great guns with my platoon. Those are little things. Depart with dignity, depart your way. I can't tell you how many times I saw in the last 10 years of my service, depart with dignity that were either depressing or the member was going quite reluctantly to what was supposed to be their depart with dignity event. If you like quiet and intimate, then make sure whoever is organizing the event does respect your wishes. Not everyone needs a parade. Some want it, good for them, go for it and enjoy it. But it's your depart with dignity, so try and shape the event to best suit you. You might want a breakfast, you might want a dinner, you might want a lunch. I've been to ones that are a lot like mess dinners, some that are like parades. I chose a luncheon with a small circle of folks, kind of reflected a large span of my career. Again, there's no recipe. It has to respect your wishes and your idea of how you would like to wrap up your career. Veterans Affairs is a really big organization. They are a different organization from National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. So for transitioning members and for families, you need to understand there's a different way to relate to Veterans Affairs than the way you dealt with Canadian Armed Forces, where there's a lot of your own folk in uniform across the counter or on the phone. At Veterans Affairs, it's another organization. My initial interview as I was transitioning out was in the middle of the release proceedings where I'm doing medicals, dentals, getting papers in order, taking uniforms back to supply, and the whole runaround of the last couple of weeks. And I thought it would be good to take time out and sit down and have a chat with a Veterans Affairs representative. In my case, it was a very bad experience. What it tended to do was trigger me throughout the interview because it wasn't an interview to understand goals or aspirations. It was an interview to gather as much information about my case profile as possible. And I have 3 medical conditions that carried through with me into release. And so there was a long questionnaire. It was in a very small room, rather claustrophobic. It wasn't well lit. And the person across from me was really quite a young lad. He didn't have a lot of life experience and didn't seem to understand that he was making me quite emotionally upset and agitated. It could have been done very differently. I shared some of my thoughts on that with parts of the Veterans Affairs organization. But the good news is I had a very different experience as time went on. But I'm saying that because some of you may have to go through a transition interview. Just be prepared that it may feel extremely impersonal and may ask you to recall things that can bring you back to some places you had maybe tried to put behind you, tried to forget, or just hadn't been top of mind and came rushing up to the surface. So please be mindful of that and be prepared when you go in that it might not be exactly what you're looking for. And I'll come back to that in some of the better parts in a moment. As I say, there's no right or wrong time to put in your release, only what works for you and your family. I say that because I passed 35 years, and really my commitment with Lucie was that we do 35 and then hang up the hat and do something else. But I stayed on for a few extra months, partly for succession planning, but also partly because I was in the middle of a medical review board. And so the dilemma became, for my particular case, do I wait for the results of the review board and possibly 3B medical release, or do I simply put in my voluntary release now and let the board catch up to me whenever they catch up with whatever decision they have? And so in my case, the right answer was I should have got out at 35. By staying an extra few months, I took a real cost in my personal health, my sense of humor, I think, and certainly my patience. But I was smart enough to say, you know what, this stops now. It's gone long enough, and it was really time for me to change perspective.
And anyway, I think the review board keeps going anyway, whether you're in or not.
Yeah, and at the release section, I was blessed to have someone who's a civilian who had the benefit of continuity in the chair and understood and was able to explain to me not to worry about this medical review board and the result. If it's a 3B, they would adjust retroactively any of the release conditions, any of the release benefits. The only thing I'd be missing out by going earlier would be perhaps a degree of case management or case continuity from Defense to Veterans Affairs.
So in other words, if the member has a medical condition, it might be worth checking if you're going into a review board, do you have to stay until the board renders a decision, or can you go now and will they apply the decision retroactively should you have retired? So it's not a given that you have to stay just because there's a review board on your case. It's better to verify because you might be able to go when you want to go.
Some people may benefit from sticking around simply because their medical case requires much more care or much more medication or some kind of case management that I didn't experience. And that's why I say there's no cookie cutter for this. In my case, I made the right decision to go when I did. I might have been a little bit late, but I didn't prolong it for another 6 or 8 months. That would have been a much worse decision. The importance of asking questions and connecting with community. Again, we're trained in the military to sort of heal together and carry on and to sort of blend in, be part of the unit, part of the team. At the time of release, you really need to do your homework. You really need to ask questions about what benefits apply to you, what are the obligations you have going through transition. And when I say connecting with the community, you need to realize transition is about letting go of defense and the armed forces. So now you need to be connecting with the people who are going to form your social support network when you're out of the forces. And so, as Margaret's highlighted there, you're your own best advocate. You and perhaps a loved one, depending on your medical condition, if you are in a severe medical state, it may be really helpful to go through the release process with an advocate by your side, like a partner, like a sibling, like somebody who you trust is very close to you and who can help recall some of the conversations, help understand the details, and help also prompt you for asking the questions when they need to be asked. I can't underestimate that point. You need to ask the questions when you can, because once you're out, you're out. It's a very sudden and abrupt stop when you're done the last day, and at that point, all that you know for support changes, except one thing, your family.
In other words, access to the orderly room to get answers to your questions, gone.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. So you have to ask the questions before you go. And very important, one in particular that I recall we have to really, really stay on top of was the follow-up with CISIP. And all the benefits that you're entitled to, stay on top of it, because they tell you that everything is fine, and then you get a letter 3 months later saying, well, you haven't signed this, you haven't done that, you haven't signed that, or it's not the way you wanted. So do stay on top of that and do confirm over and over again, even if you have to do it 2 or 3 times. Every time you get a letter, call them back and confirm that they have done what you want them to do, because some of the benefits you have like you have conversion privileges and they run out after a certain period of time. Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 3 months, but do check that. Specifically, we're talking life insurance, any type of insurance you might have with CISIP. Like, do stay on top and make sure it's converted to what you want, because there are different levels of coverages and different premiums, and like all of that has to be established. They're not going to have access to your paycheck like they used to. So very, very important that you stay on top of that.
So one of the other things to appreciate about CISIP in particular, all of us hopefully have at least been exposed to and understand what CISIP plans are available for us and our family, but things like coverage after release, some of the ongoing programs that seem to come through CISIP for dental and insurance, really, really important, as Lucie said, you follow up, because what many people don't appreciate is CISIP has a head office in Ottawa, but CISIP also has a head office in Halifax. And those two don't always communicate well together. Through no fault of any individual, they just operate on very different levels in almost independent systems. Very hard sometimes for the file to connect between the head office and the Halifax office. And very hard sometimes as a member or a spouse to know, where is my file? Who's handling my file at this point in time? And I can only imagine, we were in Ottawa where there's a more robust CISIP personnel presence. But I recall many bases seeing CISIP representatives turn over on a yearly, sometimes 3 or 4 months basis, as they'd hire somebody and that person would then move to another opportunity, or they'd be a military partner that got posted. So CISIP is one to pay careful attention to, and make sure you have everything in writing. In terms of the military, again, rest and recovery, a whole bunch of people told me before I was getting out, Russ, you're gonna be sleeping for about the first 6 months. I didn't believe them. I figured 6 to 8 weeks. It took me a good 3 to 6 months to really regain my energy. I did a lot of outside work when I first got out of the military. I was disconnected from the phone, disconnected from the computer, and it was really beneficial to go out, get fresh air, get sunlight, and change my rhythm. But I was napping every afternoon for, I think, the first 3 months. I just didn't have the energy, and I didn't realize that until I stopped that treadmill of the military routine and went, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was this tired. So you have to rebuild reserves, and it doesn't hurt to make some plans to take it easy in the first 6 months as you regain some energy and reserves. At that 3 to 6 month point, Veterans Affairs followed up with a call to me, complete opposite of what I had at the initial interview. It was nothing but positive, very helpful client rep on the end of the phone, very helpful in terms of information, explaining what I needed to do, made me feel connected, made me feel good. So I want to temper those who are listening, your impression about Veterans Affairs by saying, yeah, the initial interview process wasn't the best for me in the location I was, but the follow-up rocked, because I had a knowledgeable person, I had a mindful person, and a person who knew my file. So there are resources out there that can help. You need to open your mind and allow them to help you, and to listen to the advice and support they're offering to you. And then I put a few other comments on volunteering, interests, hobbies, friends, that kind of thing. Everybody I've spoke to, especially those who I know who've had post-traumatic stress or OSI, has had a successful transition when they've had something. Now, it could be shooting a bow, it could be hunting, it could be fly fishing, it could be walking the dog. It's some interest they have that they want to pursue after they retire. Important to rest, yes, but important as well, as I said at the front end, with goals, to have something you want to pursue. And it could be reconnecting with your loved one. It could be reconnecting with friends. I can tell you in the first year I got out, I reconnected with some people who, because of all the postings, I had not been able to sit down face to face with and have a coffee or have a beer. And so one of my strategies when I got out was every couple of weeks, find somebody who I had lost face-to-face touch with and try to reconnect if they were in the area. And it's been so rewarding to reconnect with classmates from 20, 30 years ago, to reconnect with people who I had known who were in Ottawa many years ago, and here we are now on opposite sides of the town, but we took the time to drive into the middle and meet, just reconnect socially, because it allows for the replacement of that social world you get when you're in a work environment, in an office environment. So volunteering has the same effect. In my case, getting out, I decided to be very stingy about where and who I volunteer with, and I made it known to 2 organizations that I was willing to support their cause. I picked 2 because I knew I didn't have all that much energy, and I didn't want to overextend or indulge the other way, getting out and trying to do everything and maybe not do anything well. But it's been a very rewarding experience to work with a couple of organizations that are just outstanding for their values, for their mission, and their goals. And again, there's a social element to that too that allows you to feel connected and contributing. Of course, if you want to go to work, I will not hesitate to put in a plug for Helmets to Hard Hats, Canada Company, the Military Employment Transition Program, which connects employers with transitioning military, Met Spouse, which helps spouses find employment, whether it's on postings or as they're transitioning out with their loved one. Because one aspect, and I guess maybe I'll come to it now, for me, I joined the forces at 17, and I had a salary from the forces for almost 36 years. Suddenly, where's the money coming from? How do I pay the mortgage? How do I buy groceries? What's it going to look like? All I knew were the horror stories of a number of my peers who got out and didn't get their pension for many, many months. Well, have I saved up many, many months of salary to just cover that period? Have I got a bank that's going to loan me some money so I can wait for the pension check to show up? Those were real fears. Whether they were well-found or not was another story, because, in fact, my pension check showed up exactly 30 days after my release date.
And he's financially secure, but Russ is still very insecure in terms of finances.
Again, no guarantees in life. I have a reserve colleague who got out, and it took him a year and a half to get his first pension check. So, again, planning doesn't hurt. And if you want to get to work, I highly recommend connecting online through Military Employment Transition, MET, or MET Spouse. If you're medically releasing and you have a significant disability that's going to limit your ability to work in the workforce, then MET Spouse becomes a very real concern for a partner who may have been working part-time or may not have been working, but suddenly needs to bring in a significant income to close the gap. So that's why I mentioned finance was a big concern to me. Am I going to be able to work? Am I going to get my pension? How do I establish a new stability? So I don't know, Margaret, if we can move into the next slide, if you're controlling those.
Absolutely. It takes a village.
Yeah, and I'll try and get through these ones a little quicker so we can open up for questions. I put up a picture here, and on the last picture, just a shameless plug for one of my volunteer organizations, the Tasha's Wood Foundation. I had the privilege to present a children's book that is created to bring awareness to children of families who have a parent who suffers operational stress injury or post-traumatic stress, and to raise the awareness in His Excellency and Mrs. Johnson about that group in the military, in the RCMP, and in first responders. And it was very rewarding that within a year release, I was able to contribute to an organization that has such a fine set of goals to provide creative energy to those children and a different way to think about the world. Just a wonderful group. Whoops. Have we been cut up there?
Have we lost you?
Oh, okay.
Nope.
She's
Yeah,
pulling them
okay.
up. Thanks for that, Margaret.
You're welcome.
So, as I said, just a little bit of a plug. This organization is really ex-military who are trying to help children in our community, and that was an important one for me. When I talked about the village, I put up a picture of our folks in Naples, Rita and Pepe, and their wonderful kids. They lived right across the street from us. When we've been posted, we've chosen to live off base, to live in communities, and that was true when we lived out of the country. And we were always richly rewarded for it. They became our social network. They integrated us into the whole village of Ackley. We ate together, we cried together, we laughed together. It was just a wonderful experience, as brief as it was. And they're still friends to this day, and I consider them to be a part of our family. So the village part, we often think of our family and who's under the roof, or maybe our parents and sisters and uncles and aunts. But it's also the military family, as I'm sure most of you know. We're a big tribe spread out all over the place, but we get it because we've got that shared experience. And that makes us family. We don't always like everybody in our family, but we certainly help everyone out when they're down. And that certainly has been Lucie's and my experience. Most notably when she got cancer, our relatives were there for us, absolutely, but the military family put its arms around us and helped us in all kinds of ways. But our civilian community in Winnipeg rocked in many, many ways, making us feel included, making us feel connected, making sure we were never have that feeling of being alone or being without recourse or a place to turn. When you get out and transition to civilian life, family's important. The military community, to me, I have mixed feelings. I'll always be military. I'm sure every vet feels that way. We know it in our heart because we've served our country. But the civilian community, it's important that we become a part of that because we're getting support from them, but also because it's time for us to contribute in a slightly different way. So we're pursuing interests now that are in the community around us. And that to me is really important if you want a successful transition. Could be a small village. That's where we've put our effort the last 6 or 7 years. And we've got no regrets for it. Few other thoughts. Patience. It takes time to recover. It takes time to establish a new routine, what I call the new normal. And we had practice of that with post-traumatic stress and me learning not to get angry at every fly or every little thing that happens in the house. But when you transition, there's a new routine that kicks in, but it takes time to emerge. And you start to redistribute the chores around the house. In our case, both working from home, wonderful experience for us. Some of you may decide, well, I need to get right back out in the workforce in an office setting. You may find, though, that your travel arrangements or your work hours cause you to adjust your routine. So it's a big one.
Yeah, if I might pitch in here, it's important to talk about your retirement before you get there with your spouse, because if you have children in the house or if you haven't been in the house for a long time and there's a routine going on here and suddenly you're kind of perceived as barging in, you're always there and it might disrupt that routine. So you might want to talk about the foreseeable future. What is going to change in both your routine and how is it going to affect the routine of the house? It's not something that you want to wait until you get there, because then it might create tension and it's not always a different discuss about things when there is tension around. You might want to discuss these things before you retire, specifically if you have children at home and one parent in particular has been sort of in charge of the children, whereas the other spouse just shows up in the evening or too late, or depending on your hours, or like in Russell's case, Russ was out of the house traveling 260 days out of 360. So, yeah, if there had been children, I mean, it was obvious I would have been the one raising them. But in a situation like that, suddenly the spouse shows up and your way of doing things might have to change because it's not just you anymore, it's both of you. So this is the kind of things you want to talk about before you retire, like before you get to that point. So everything is clear and everything is understood and everybody's on the same page. I mean, it's always better to talk about these things when there is no tension than rather than, you know, when you get into a crisis or...
And there'll be some folks who've gone through a deployment and reunion, and it's a very similar experience.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you know, after being away for a while, there you are back. If you're going to work at home or retire and stay at home, it's a very similar experience to a deployment reunion, where you have to reestablish who's doing what the routine is. And as Lucie said, it's kind of a give and take. We've got to renegotiate sort of who does what, when, and what works in this time, in this context. But I think it was a good experience for us because we did talk about that before I got out, and we thought it would be a good thing, and now having done it for a year and a half,
it is a good thing.
No regrets.
It is a very good thing.
I talked about finances. As you said, pension for me was 30 days on the dot, but it was my biggest fear. I had this uncontrollable fear that it was going to take 6 months to get my pension. I wasn't planning on working when I get out because I knew I needed to break. And so I got quite concerned about that. As it turned out, in my case, needlessly. It doesn't hurt to plan and make sure you understand what your finances will look like before you get out. So I think enough said there.
Yeah.
When I talk about life balance, I don't really believe in balance. I tend to do things with my sort of whole of spirit, but you need to have perspective, I guess is maybe a better way of putting it. And the perspective could be that you're in the military, but when you get out, it's family that's there. If you're very lucky and if you've paid attention to a caring, nurturing relationship while you were in, that's what's enduring. That's what you need to sustain. That's what you need to work on. So try to remember that as you're getting ready for transition, and realize that I know military was a big part of who I was, but it doesn't have to be the only thing. And so that's where I think the title of this was The Best Is Yet to Come. As I was getting out, I was trying to look forward and say, there are better things ahead. I loved my career, but I think I love life, and I love what's yet to come. And with that perspective, it's made transition a whole lot easier. And now we're starting to see some of those things that we had talked about that'll happen in the future. I mentioned ask questions and connect with your community. I underscored again, you're your own best advocate, but family's the most important part of your transition. Those who I know who struggled have had either just before or at the point of transition or shortly after, some family fracture, some family breakdown, a breakdown in communication, a breakdown in understanding how do we get to the new normal. So by working with her and by having her at my side, this process has worked. I think it would have been very tough and very isolating for me had we not had a solid foundation going into transition. All right. If you can go to the next one, please. This is just a little wavy line, and I love Margaret for designing that because it's kind of how it works. I was going great guns, doing all that great operational stuff. I even brought that operational mindset to the military family services before I retired. Then I got out, and it was like, hey, I can now do the little goatee, which is almost as, I don't know how it'll work for the rest of you, but when I got out as a male, I just had to grow some facial hair because I could. And I had to have that as a little reminder that I'm not in anymore. And it worked, and I carried it for many months. But that sort of high of, hey, I can sleep in the afternoon, I can do what I want now, very quickly became a bit of a, oh, the air came out of the balloon. And it was like, oh, am I going to go back to work? What am I going to do? Am I going to volunteer? Is it going to work out with the organizations I'd like to be involved with? Am I going to reconnect and establish my social circle outside the military milieu? How's it going to work with those who are still serving? Those were big questions for me. So that neutral zone, I was just trying to get the answers to a lot of personal questions. And like I say, I go to coffee, I volunteered, I started to look for a job, and that's where I go, it gets better because this is Lucie and I just hand in hand, and I'm clearly not in uniform now. I'm in civilian attire, and it's been all good.
Yep.
So we mentioned Lucie wanted to really share an important perspective. We've talked a bit about some of my journey, and she's added some of her perspective, but I think now I'll turn it over to you for kicking off the next one.
Healthcare. Okay, as most of you are aware, the new policy when you move is if you do a move to intended place of residence, it has to be done within 1 year of release. So it used to be 2 years, but now it's 1 year, and it has to be more than 40 kilometers from where you live at the moment of your move. The other important thing to take into consideration is healthcare. When you retire, you're not going to be under the care of a military doctor anymore. You will now be joining the private sector care. So, which means you're going to have to get a health card from the province where you reside. Now, the process of the health card can be daunting in itself because you've never been in the system. In most cases, you've never been in the provincial health system. So you suddenly show up at 40, 50, 60 years old and you've never had a health card. So they're always careful to make sure that you're not immigrant trying to get a card and then moving back to another country. So they're going to be asking you for so much documents, it's not even funny. In our case, they asked Russell to provide purchase contracts of our last 2 houses, and oh, by the way, they had to be signed by a notary or a lawyer to prove that they were originals. And then, no, you can't send copies, and this kind of questions, like it's kind of a nonsense, but you have to understand their point of view. They don't know who you are. You've never been in the system. So first you get that health card. The other thing to remember, and that's where the move to intended place of residence comes into question. Once you have a provincial health card for the first time, some provinces will require that you stay in the province for a specific period of time, be it 1 year in the case of Quebec. So in other words, if you intend to move and you do get your health card and then you move within the 1 year, you have a problem. So very, very, very important to check what are the requirements in the province where you live if you intend to move. If you don't intend to move, don't worry about it. Just get your health card. It'll take a few months. Once you have the card, you can do whatever you want, and in the meantime, they'll assign you a temporary number anyway should you need medical care. But once you have your health card, and if you do intend to move, please do check with your point of service in your province what are the requirements. And if they tell you that you have to hold a card for a minimum of 1 year before you can move to another province, bring with you, it's not a bad idea to bring with you the rules about the move to intended place of residence, so you can show to them that you're not trying to do anything illegal. It's just that in order to respect the rules of G&G about move to intended place of residence, it has to be done within 1 year. In that case, as it was the case with Russ, they said, oh, okay, we understand now, no problem, here's your health card, you can move to the other province. The other thing to remember too is when you change province in Canada, if you own a health card, and that's regardless of whether you move within a year or not, if you have a health card of a province and you move to another province, your original health card will cover all your expenses for the first 3 months of residence in the other province. You don't get a new health card in the other province until that first 3 months has elapsed So it's a little bit complicated, and that's across Canada. It doesn't matter which province you move to or from. You have to keep your health card for another 3 months in the new province, and then you get a new one. But you have to ask for the new one the moment you get in the province. So it's not like I'll wait for 3 months and ask later. You have to ask. They take your health card number in note. They open your file, and then they'll issue you one within about, you'll get it like a week or two before the expiry of the 3 months. So that's a little bit complicated. The other thing to remember, too, is that you no longer go to the military hospital or clinic to get your prescription drugs if that's what you've been doing. You're now going to be going to a Shoppers Drug Mart, Junction C, whatever, private pharmacy, Rexall, and you get, as a retiree, you get a Public Service Alliance of Canada card. That is your insurance program for medications. And do you have yours? I wouldn't be a bad idea to show it. And on that card, you'll have your plan number, which is the plan number of retired military personnel. And you show that card when you buy medication. And what that will do is that in most pharmacies in Canada, they will recognize that card, and you're not going to have to pay for the prescription and then ask for reimbursement later. They will automatically get their reimbursement through their computer systems, and you'll only pay the difference. For example, if you get a prescription that costs $55, oh, here's the card. Can you see that?
It doesn't show up very well, but it's public service healthcare plan, so it's very similar to the ones that your partners and children would have, but it's now one for you.
Now, this is
the one I have is just paper.
This is not your health card. This is your insurance card. So two different things. You have your provincial health card, and then you have your insurance card for medication, for any kind of services you might be getting from a hospital. For example, if you need to be hospitalized, you show your health card, and you also show that card. That card will pay what the health card won't pay. In other words, what the province won't pay will be reimbursed in part, depending on the plan you've chosen with CAF, on the insurance that you have with Public Service Alliance of Canada. So that's where the level of insurance becomes important, because the government card, the provincial health card, will pay for ward accommodation in a hospital. Depending on the insurance plan you get with CCIP, the PSHCP plan will reimburse the difference between the ward and semi-private or ward and private. So you want to make sure you talk about that when you're retired with CCIP, so you have the level of coverage that you do need or do want.
So a couple other things that can be very helpful. First, when you're getting out, you have to find a family doctor. You need the doctor for prescription renewal. You need them for case referral. You need them for a host of things. They're the big gatekeeper. In Ottawa area, they have a program through the Military Family Resource Center called Operation Family Doc, merely a connection service. The Family Resource Center found doctors who were taking new patients and connected those of us who were moving into the area or who were recently retired to a doctor that would be taking new patients. So that was a big game changer in terms of establishing care on release. The big thing that helped the doctor I was referred to was where Margaret has highlighted there. I had a 2-page medical summary to take the however many volumes of paper I had on my medical file and distill it down to 2 pages. So in 2 minutes, my new doctor understood my case profile. That was making it a whole lot easier for her to take me on as a patient. The other thing that I gave to her was a 1-page prescription summary. So again, it took all of 2 to 3 minutes for her to understand, I'm ex-military, this many years of service, this age. These are my medical conditions that are chronic and persistent. And then we could have a conversation to get some color onto that very, very brief summary. And
by law, every doctor in Canada has to maintain these 2 documents, the medical summary and the prescription summary. It's on the opening page of every single Canadian patient in this country that's serviced by a doctor licensed to practice in Canada. By law, they have to maintain that. So if you need a copy of that, it's something they can get to you fairly rapidly, usually within 3 weeks.
In the case of military, the way it worked is while I was doing my release proceedings and clearing through the medical clinic, I asked him, can I get my 2-page summary on my last interview with the doctor? He said, sure, he'd be happy to prepare it and have it ready for when I was doing my out routine.
It's not something that takes a very long time. Like, they can do it for you very quickly. You can get a copy of your file, and that will take a long time before it comes in the mail, and you can still ask for that. But the summary for the medical condition and prescription is something that is really short, and you can get it really quickly, and it'll save you a lot of time and trouble when you're looking for a doctor.
The advice I got on the medical file was, if I knew roughly when I was getting out, then 3 to 6 months before my release, put in the access to information request. The orderly room can help you with, or the RMS clerk can help you find the form if you don't know where to go. The medical clinic can also help you with the very specific one for your medical records. I asked for 3 things through ATI prior to my release, but I tried to time it so I'd have most of my file at the time. And it was medical records, my dental records, and my personnel file. And I got all of those. The one that came the fastest, ironically, was my personnel file.
Another point to remember, most military members or retired will say, oh, we're going to be traveling now. Well, if you do, you have to be insured. So you're not military anymore. So make sure that, again, in the CSIP, the CSHCP plan that you get through CSIP, that you do have travel coverage and that it is sufficient to cover potential expenses that you could get, keeping in mind that if you travel to USA, medical costs a lot more in the United States than it does in Canada. That plan will cover the difference between what your provincial government will pay and what is the cost down there of medical services. So make sure it's enough. If it is not enough, you can always buy supplemental travel insurance with various private companies. Most banks offer that anyway. You have a credit card with a bank. You have a Visa card, for example, you can get additional insurance there if you don't have enough in case you're traveling out of country and there'd be a risk there. So that's very important to be covered.
Yeah, one last point. I put in some plugs for Canada Company and some others on employment. For those who are medically releasing or who may develop medical conditions due to service but that show up after release, be aware the Legion offers free support from a service officer to help you navigate basically Veterans Affairs, but they'll also make you aware of anything that the Legion can do for you and any other benefits that may be available from partner organizations. But the piece with Veterans Affairs is important because they can do a full case review, and they're the only organization that has a government mandate to have access and the necessary privacy upheld. But they can be extremely valuable when you're trying to learn a new system, Veterans Affairs, and you're not sure how it works, or if you have a case that's somewhat complex. I would highly recommend checking with the Legion and asking for a service officer so you can sit down and have a chat and see what they can do to help ease the navigation of the bureaucracy around Veterans Affairs, Legion, and the many other organizations that want to offer benefits to vets.
Yeah. If you're looking for a doctor, it might be a good idea to check with local hospitals in your area. In Quebec, there is something called the CCSSS, a CSSS, and they usually maintain a list of patients looking for doctors. I'm not aware of a similar system in other provinces, but I know you can contact local hospitals and ask them if there is a list of patients looking for medical, for doctors, for private doctors, and you can usually add your name to that list, and they do sort of a triage by condition. It's not like first come, first serve. It's how urgent is your case, and if it is urgent, you'll have priority over less urgent cases. Like it's a good thing to check with local hospitals if you don't have a doctor or if your spouse doesn't have one.
So now we're tight on time. Yes, I agree, Rose. MFRCs have that information as well.
Yeah.
If you can go to the next slide right there.
Colonel Mann, we're not tight on time. We're doing beautifully on time.
Great.
Okay.
And this is phenomenal information. So yes, we're ready to go to the next slide.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ram through so that I can allow for questions or discussion because I don't think you just want to listen to Lucie and I the whole night. I was asked to talk about what am I doing now that I'm sort of through that dip in the curve and it gets better. When I get out, my plan wasn't necessarily to retire fully. I wanted to continue to contribute and to do some work. And so Very important for those who have a valid security clearance. Before you release, find an organization, an HR firm, a headhunting firm, a job placement firm who has access to work with Public Works, Government Services Canada, or whatever their new title is, to have your security clearance transferred over to the civilian sector. And in my case, I went to Excel HR. I sat down, had a copy. I said, look, I'm getting out. I'm not working for, as I said, at the time I was telling them 6 to 8 weeks, I'm taking off, then I'm coming back to work. Well, they nodded.
Well, his wife said it would take at least a year. I was right.
What I did say, the important point was getting my security clearance moved across, because I didn't want to have to start over. That's another investment you've made in developing trust and confidence with your employer. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to carry that to another employer if you plan on continuing to work. And so Excel helped me through that process. We worked with Public Works, and I was able to get my security clearance brought over. So there was no interruption in terms of access to sensitive work or sensitive files in the new organization. In my case, I chose to work with Excel for a period of time. I still remain associated with them, but now I've set up my own consulting business. I'm a sole proprietor, and so I'm looking to work on a part-time basis with various organizations. This slide is about my passion. I thought my transition really occurred when I got brought into military family services, as it was a non-public organization working with not-for-profits and really community-based. But what I quickly understood was MFRCs, the Family Service Program, the chain of command, they're all worried about connecting with families, with members, and getting services for families. But quite often, families understand this better than all of us. You're relying on municipal and provincial services. You're relying on doctors, teachers, social workers. You're relying on child care workers who aren't national defense, who aren't necessarily us. And those people may or may not understand the military lifestyle. So with the Vanier Institute of the Family, again, I've aligned and agreed to work with them on trying to educate family physicians, educate employers, educate a number of organizations, while the Family Service Program is doing its thing with families and helping members in transition. We want families and veterans and members who go through the door of a clinic, a hospital, a school, a child care organization to meet people who are mindful and understand their military lifestyle context.
Because I know it comes as a shock to most military people, but in Canada, about 80 to 85% of people, civilian people, have no idea how the military works. Like, I don't know how many times I was asked, well, how come, even doctors ask me, well, how come you're coming to see me? Aren't military doctors taking care of you? And they have a hard time understanding why family members are not serviced by military doctor, and it's totally illegal. I mean, they're not allowed to do it unless it's case of life and death, but the population at large does not understand how the military works, how it functions, what it has or does not have access to, what their family members have or do not have access to. So it's the education part of the public is a very important part, and I think that leadership circle is a good way of getting to do that.
So for military, again, we all know that our spouses have to go to provincial health care. We all know that when we get out, we're going to have to go find a doctor. The problem is the doctors don't necessarily understand that. The teachers don't necessarily understand why Johnny or Jane's acting up, because they don't understand the deployment cycle and some of the effects that deployment has on children. Child care organizations don't always understand what's going on when a normally active child becomes very withdrawn. Those are all things that we align ourselves with professional associations, organizations in the communities and associations that are civilian, so they can help develop a body of knowledge, the awareness and capacity to serve military and veteran families. And so that really is where I found my passion outside The military life is to contribute to the community, but in a very different way now, and in a new role that takes me a step away from, but not completely removed from, the community that I've known all of my adult life. So maybe I'm cheating a bit on my transition by staying in there, but as I say, I think I really found my passion in my final job in uniform. I probably wore civilian clothes more days than not in that role, just so I could connect better with families, with family resource centers, and civilian organizations. And I find now that the need to continue the education process it's not gone away, and it continues. So I'm trying to bring that message forward through the Vang Institute and all the wonderful partners around the table. Last comment on that, the table has everything from CEOs to military and veteran families at the table. MFRCs are represented at the table. Veterans Affairs, National Defense are at the table. But you have private sector healthcare organizations. You have doctors, social workers. You have folks from the Canadian Mental Health Association, from the Mental Health Commission. You have Canada Company who's working on employment. And they're all there to really exchange and share information and hopefully not duplicate each other's efforts. Because the other piece that I appreciated was we're just too small. We have very few organizations that align themselves to support the military world and the veteran community. And so we would do very well to try and help them really get more effective by working together than to all try and reinvent the same thing. So an organization called CERIC created a guide for employment counselors all about the military life and transition, and a chapter on military spouses. It's a fairly significant book, and it's backed by evidence. Well, we have that book now, and they've agreed that any of the other organizations at the leadership table can use that information to educate their association, their community, their practitioners. You have SIMPR, who's at that table, the Institute for Military and Veteran Health Research, and Heidi Kranz online with the Family Panel and the Family Track for Research. And they're connecting, trying to understand what are the gaps in understanding. What are the things we need to get better insight in so we can produce the evidence that will inform policy and programming. So now I'm going way past transition. I've jumped both feet. I'm there doing that thing now. But I think it's relevant because it connects me back to where my passion is and the goals that I set many years ago. Yep. So Margaret, I think I've probably raised the temperature of the room about 5 degrees with all the hot air I've blown out.
No.
So
I can see your passion on the leadership circle, and it's beautiful to see everybody who's working together to educate, because the education piece is crucial, is it not?
Oh, it is. Yeah. It is. It's somewhat unfortunate, but you know, compare and contrast. In the United States, there are 40,000 nonprofits who've registered with a purpose to support the military and veteran community. And in Canada, we probably can count them on one hand. There are like the big three: Canada Company, True Patriot Love, and maybe Wounded Warriors. As you try to move beyond those three, you may be able to get yourself to the second hand of fingers. We don't have that many. So we try and get the most we can and connect everybody as best we can so that they can do what they need to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Are there any, is it time now we can open the session up for questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. All right, so there's no questions. So what I'd like you to do is go to the top left-hand side of your screen. There's a big, thick blue pointer. It's like an arrow. And grab that arrow and claim a place underneath My MFRC PEI. So you have some white space to write. There we go, Linda. Thank you. Christian, Dee, Heidi, if you want to claim a spot. Rose, I'll get to your question in just a minute. Thank you. Great. Now use your text tool to write 1 or 2 points of what you found was fascinating. What was your aha moment from today? What did you learn? And I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to process that and use your text tool, and then we'll share one by one. And Rose, while we're doing that, do you have a question that I can answer at this point?
Yeah, my question is, Russ, for you said you had a difficult time with the VAC interview, and I know that a lot of members do. But I was wondering what you specifically did to be able to get past that and move forward, and then see VAC as a good tool. So a lot of members don't.
That's a really good question, Rose. I can still remember how I felt coming home, and the drive home I had to really focus so I could make sure I was paying attention to driving. And I got home, and I think I probably vented to Lucie in a fairly direct way. And I bet the guy who interviewed me probably didn't have a clue, because he was doing his job. And his job said he had to ask a long series of questions, and he had to answer them on the computer. So what I did was I decided I will give feedback to the Veterans Affairs Organization about this. That suggested, for example, what if the member was to simply take that questionnaire themselves? It's an online questionnaire. It would be very easy for me to simply read the question, answer it, and I could have this gentleman or resource there. If I had a question about it, just understanding if there was something that wasn't clear, then I could ask for clarification. But instead, what happened is he would read out a question in a very impersonal tone, and it would force me to think and talk about some really poignant moments in my career. And in my case, I had a number of missions. Each one in and of itself built layers that my psychiatrist had to unravel in therapy many, many years later. In the space of 1 hour, this gentleman brought all of that back to the surface. And so when I came home, I was venting. There was a long walk with the dog. I do not have a service dog. But after my second deployment, I did have a pet. I was a single lad. Lucie wasn't directly in my life at that point. She was far away and a friend. So it was me and the dog. And I remember it was that dog who brought me back to believing in the world again. Because he forced me to walk him. He forced me to get out. When you walk a dog, people say hello, people ask questions. And so he had helped me bring me back from a place that was really not a good place for me. And in the course of this interview, I found myself right back there. So I connected with Jackson. I went for a long walk. And Jackson didn't do anything, but here's the thing. Jackson doesn't judge. Jackson doesn't ask questions. He just wants to go and enjoy the moment. In the moment.
Don't say the word.
And so back to this moment in time and not the place that was not a good time for me. And I mean, it's not necessarily the best coping mechanism, but it sure helps you bring out and stop escalating the emotional state and escalating what I call the downward spiral into that black place. So those are the things I did, but then to me it was, I need to make sure Veterans Affairs knows this is not an experience that was positive for me, and I'm not what we call a complex PTSD case. So what happens if now you have someone who's got complex mental wellness issues and physical issues and goes through that same process? They're probably not coming out of there feeling very good. Right. And I don't know where they are in their journey if they've already been given tools for coping and adapting. And I had a few, so I tried to use them. Things like deep breathing, walk the dog, stay connected to my wife, live in the moment, come back to this moment in time, not the past. So, I mean, it's not really rocket science, Rose, but that's kind of what I learned over a couple of setbacks in my journey with post-traumatic stress in what was it, sorry, 2003 or 4? So 2004 to now, there's some pretty basic tools. The other tool is exercise. In this case, I didn't use exercise other than walking the dog, but if you do rigorous exercise, it helps, again, bring you back to this point in time. It helps dispel a lot of negative energy and allows your mind to clear. So those are kind of some of the techniques that work for me.
Thank you. And Tammy, did you have a question or comment?
Hi there. Actually, I did. Hi, Russ. Hi, Lucy.
Hi. Is this Tammy in the U.S.?
This is Tammy Kinksey. I'm in San Diego. Great to hear you both on here. I have a lot of respect for you, Russ, and I think you know that. But my question to you basically is, do you ever miss the uniform? You may have already answered that, because I was kind of late coming on.
Yeah. Story time. I love my community, and I've tried to stay connected to a number of military folks. And so I was at a logistics retirement dinner with a gentleman I respect greatly, Bernie Poulin, who just got out this week, and my old boss was there, Mark Watson. And Commodore Watson asked me, so we're going to have to get you out to an event where you can get your uniform again, Russ. And I kind of looked at him and I went, what do you mean? Now, I don't want to embarrass the good Commodore, but when I got out, I said to Lucy, I'm getting rid of all my uniforms except one set. I will keep them for a year. I still don't know, Tammy, why I kept one set for 1 year, but when that anniversary came and went, that uniform went. So just in case something came up that I could not foresee or understand, I didn't think I'd have to wear it. I kept one. What I have kept are my medals and my ribbons, and those mean a lot to me.
And his mess kit, even though he won't wear it most of the time.
And a mess kit is a personal choice whether you want to wear that or move to a tux. And a number of folks gave me advice to feel free to just keep the mess kit for a while, because it's one less thing to worry about. And then when you're ready, you'll know, and you'll go out and get yourself a tux. And I'm pretty much getting to that point. You know, all the introductions were about Colonel Russ Mann and Colonel this and Colonel that. You know, in my heart, I'm Russ. And I'll still own my medals with pride, because it's quite an investment of me in my country. It's memories of people I've lived, worked, fought with, some of whom didn't make it through. And every one of those medals that got mounted is like a little piece of me and a piece of the team I was able to work with at that point in time. And
but honestly, given the choice, you won't wear either the uniform or the mess kit.
No, I wanted to look forward, and I wanted to look to the what's next. And the what's next is I'm a veteran, but I'm a civilian, and I'm very proud of my service, and I don't deny my service, but I'm contributing now as Russ, and so I think it was part of helping me understand transition was saying, okay, if I'm not this now, then what am I? And so you have to reflect on what is in your core. I mean, yeah, I'm a military logistician. I've been a CO and a leader. I have a lot of care and compassion for the community and the people I've worked with and the people who've supported them. None of that changes just because I take the uniform off, right? But a whole new possibility opens up to explore civilian aspects. And it's hard to do as long as you cling to that uniform as your identity. The uniform is not me. The collection of experience and people I know and love, that's more, I think, a reflection.
In other words, the uniform did not make Russ. Russ made the uniform.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Love the response, and I also want to say thank you Thank you for you being you. And that's why, one of the reasons why I totally respect you both, and I thank you for sharing what you shared today. So.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Christian and Heidi, can you click somewhere else on the board? Have you written something down on the board? Because I'm not able to read it. If you click somewhere, there we go. So Heidi, are you able to share a little bit about what you've written here? Very affirming as a researcher that we were looking at things that matter. You don't forget you're muted.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to really share your story. And I think as researchers and as civilian researchers, we're really trying to figure out a way to represent the perspective of those who have served and their families. And there's so many different balls we have in the air around this to help advance the scenario, and so many projects that we're doing to try and help develop an understanding of what healthcare providers, for example, need to understand. It's very nice to hear how much the work that we're trying to do is resonating with the experience of people who are living it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you know my view, Heidi. Thank you for what you do. I think research is absolutely critical to inform policy and programming, and it's been so amazing to watch SIMVR bring to life a community of family researchers so that we can accelerate the process of understanding and insight. Much needed, and I think the application of it will be even more valuable.
Thank you. That's a great comment. And Rose, you were saying some of the things that interested you about this particular presentation. Did you want to share CISIP and get everything in writing?
Yeah, well, for sure. You know, we have people come to us all the time, not all the time, but we have people coming to us who are transitioning out and frustrated oftentimes. So being able to give those little tips and pointers to them might ease some of their concerns and worries. And also, I mean, they're really simple, easy steps to do that, you know, could end up making life a lot better.
So, yeah, and I'll ask the Veterans Affairs folks to validate that I'm not misleading anyone, but I think when we talk CISIP, it becomes really important to do two things ahead of release. Open your MyVac account. There's no restriction on when you can do that, and the sooner you do it, the sooner you can go in and see how your case looks and how it feels. But why I said that related to CISIP is both VAC and CISIP have voc rehab programs. I won't pretend I know how to distinguish the two, but for someone who's looking at vocational rehab as part of their transition, absolutely critical that you talk to CISIP and to VAC and get the two conflicted and synchronized, because there'll come a point where one may or may not apply anymore and the other one will kick in. And as I say, we're not experts on everything. We're sharing our journey, but I know that that's been a source of frustration and a source of, I guess, soul searching for those who've been trying to navigate which voc rehab applies to me and how do I access. The only way is to talk to CISIP and talk to Veterans Affairs.
Yeah, again, ask questions.
But I know that is a point of contention with a number of folks who've been through transition who required voc rehab.
Okay. Thank you. And Christian, you are muted. If you want to unmute, and let me just see what you had said here. Just lost the chat. Just a moment, please. There we go. Okay, so Christian says, thank you for your time, Russ and Lucie, and for sharing your story. And it's so important to continue to increase awareness and sensitivity of health professionals to the military experience.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the difficulty encountered by members when they retire or leave the forces. It's this
that awareness
to the public healthcare system. It's a labyrinth. There's another way to describe it.
It's a labyrinth. That's good.
And each province has their little quirks, and it's all layers. The more questions you ask, the more questions it raises. And again, you need a lot of patience, and you need to ask a lot of questions. Don't lose your patience. Take notes. Put things in writing. Do your research. It's very, very important.
Just to build perspective for both families and transitioning members, just interprovincial health agreements, okay, agreements between the provinces. I had the privilege to talk to an individual who manages an entire floor of interprovincial agreements on health care. Every province negotiates individually with every other province, and you have residential coverage, non-residential coverage. You have the host of programming. Yeah. What is covered if you're a resident? What is covered if you're not? What's the billing formula back to that province? What's the mechanism for that province? Every one of them is different. Every single one.
What's covered in one province, not necessarily covered in another province. What is covered in one province at one cost is covered at a different cost. In other words, you get the flu in Montreal and you go see a doctor with your health card, the government will pay them $135 for treating you for the flu. In BC, it'll be $165. So if you live in Montreal, end up in BC, get the flu there, get treated by a BC doctor, the provincial government from Quebec is going to reimburse $135. Doctor from BC is going to want the other $30, please. And oftentimes, they will not accept your card. Some doctors in some provinces accept cards from other provinces and will be satisfied with the payment they get there. In most cases, they will ask you to pay up front, and then you claim back from your provincial health service when you go back home. So and that's left to each doctor. It's their own privilege. They can decide to accept the card or not. It's up to them.
Again, not a transitioning vet, but an experience I had with a family who were posted from Ontario to BC, and they had a special needs child, and they were going to go bankrupt because of the 90-day delay in transfer of health insurance from one province to the other, because they still had health insurance in Ontario, but to get the coverage in BC to be considered what they call an out-of-province residence. So OHIP would change what they will reimburse because they're now considered out-of-province. And then again, it goes back to that floor of interprovincial agreements. So it was very heartwarming to narrowly avert disaster, because that was one of those times where we talked to the BC government, had them pick in BC coverage and they arrived, as opposed to the 90-day delay. For transitioning members becoming veterans who are moving to an intended place of residence in a new province, we don't have that coverage for transitioning members. We have that for families of members who are posted from one province to another. So if you have complex needs, your in-province coverage and your out-of-province coverage could be reimbursed very, very differently. And I can't begin to tell you what's covered and what's not, depending on your case. You'd have to just talk to your two provinces and understand what they'll cover and what they won't.
For example, there was a case, that one, I think about a year ago. A member residing in New Brunswick was transferred to Manitoba, I believe. The spouse was 7 months pregnant. She gave birth, Alberta. She gave birth 2 months after the posting, obviously, in Alberta. And New Brunswick said, we're not paying for this. She should have waited and have the baby in New Brunswick. Why did she move within 60 days of delivery? It's like, excuse me, my husband was posted to Alberta. They don't understand. They don't get the...
Not just the not understanding, they were charging $20,000 or $22,000
for the delivery.
Birth, in Alberta, where she lives.
Because obviously you don't get to the hospital in Alberta and say, I'm just going to hold on the delivery until I get clearance to give birth. It's like, this baby is here, and and the bill is $22,000, by the way, because you moved within, you had the baby within 60 days and out of province. And you should, in New
I
Brunswick.
thought, though, that for military families, that was waived for the 3-month waiting period was waived.
The 3 months is waived for serving military families. Those agreements exist now. That battle's been fought and won. If the member applies when they arrive, there's an agreement, they'll be covered from the time they apply. But at the time they went through this, that wasn't in place.
And for your information, there's a lot of agreements in place, and sometimes the person at the desk where you're at is not aware that these agreements are in place. So they might still insist for you to pay the bill, whereas you shouldn't have to. Like we've seen it in many other cases.
This is about transition. The transitioning member, you know, David Lane, you decide suddenly you want to move to Ontario. Be aware, you're not going to be covered the day you arrive and apply. No. You're going to have a 90-day period because you're going to be treated just like anyone else. There is no agreement for transitioning members to waive the 90-day period if you're on a move to intended place of residence.
And this is where the private insurance you get with CFHCP becomes important, because for that 90 days in the new province, whatever services you get will be reimbursed at the rate of the province you just left, which might not be the same as the province you're in right now. So if you don't want to have a bill on top of what the province pays, get that PSHCP coverage and make sure you have what you need.
Well, oh my goodness, thank you so much for all these tips. Make sure you have the medical releasing files. Make sure you transfer your security clearance. In the after session email, I'm going to send out an evaluation for you to please fill in. I'm also going to send the recording of the SISUP in French and English on the pension coverage and how that all works. So you'll all have that information for you to share as you see fit. I'm so thankful for you, and I'm just going to erase this here. Sorry about that. Russ and Lucie, it's been a pleasure to have you here in our virtual classroom. I'm so thankful, and I'm going to pass you over to Diane and Dave.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. On behalf of the PEI Military Family Resource Virtual Program and Margaret McKenzie and all who participated in this virtual session, we would like to thank Russ and Lucie for their time and their unique insight into transitioning.
You're most welcome, anytime.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Yes, we really appreciate that you're sharing your story and so many great information. So I'm really appreciative. Thank you for coming out. And in order to exit out, if there's no more questions, we're going to be here for you if you have any questions. But if you need to exit out, you click on the red X at the top right-hand side of your screen. And thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we hope to see you at our other virtual programs that are upcoming.
Thanks all.